Right, hello and welcome. This is sorry, an A2 Economics video on perfect competition, long run, short run equilibrium, and monopoly, again, long run and short run equilibrium. And obviously I'll be discussing the two types of market structures as well. Right, now what hopefully you can see on the board there, they are two, questions. So there is 10 questions there. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, just to confuse you. And there are questions that basically I will be answering as I go through the video, and then at the end I'll recap all the answers in one short summary. Okay, so we'll just go through them just in case you can't see them. So the first one says is quite neat. Just actually, before I go through these, just change my mind. I think in my last video I may have covered some of these questions, not necessarily, spoken word for word answered them, but may have answered them in a way that you'll look at them now and go, I think I can answer that dead easy. So I've just got a few things there. But I would advise you just to wait, just so you're not skipping to question 8 if you can do question 8. So I'll be going through at the end, so feel free to pause the video when you want. As we're going through them if you think we've answered it. So anyway, I'll just go through them just in case you can't see them. So the first one says define perfect competition. So let's define perfect competition. The second one says give at least 3 features of a market of perfect competition. But what it actually says is give at least 3 features of perfect competition. So you could obviously give more than that. Number 3, what is the difference between normal and abnormal profit? Again, I think I may have covered that one, but I'm just going to... the reason why I want you to do... I'd like you to do a bit more on 3 with the knowledge of this video, because you could analyse it with a diagram. So, anyway, number 4, what type of profit does a market have to attract new customers? So this is related to question 3. Into the market, and also why is this eroded in the long run in the market perfect competition? So I've already given you a bit of theory there by giving you a question. Number 6, so how many firms are in a market pure monopoly? That's a fairly easy one. Number 5, that was number 6, Number 5, list and describe the 3 types of efficiencies, not spelled right, in a market of perfect competition. So I'll explain what they are in a bit. 2 of them you should already know. There's a new one that we introduced in terms of efficiencies, the concepts of them, but the application is totally different. Otherwise I won't be just asking you a question, something you already know. List the features of a monopoly, pure monopoly. And then number 8, what are the 3 types of monopoly? So I don't want to give them away, but they're just not necessarily totally different markets. But as I said, I don't want to give too much away. Number 9, what type of profit does a monopoly make in terms of pure monopoly, and why is it constant in the long run and short run? So again, we'll explain that later on. Number 10, number 10 is sort of a summary of all of them. For both the described market shows perfect competition and monopoly, draw the equilibrium diagrams, so long run and short run. Right, now one thing I would stress before we do this, obviously some of them questions you could just answer with 1 word or 2 words. Now I'm going to leave it up to you. Obviously I can't physically come have a go at you if you've not answered the questions fully, and you just watch this video at your own back, I would think. So basically you will get as much out of these questions as you put in, so as much as you do. So for number 3, if you decide to draw a diagram with that's further understanding, that's further proving your understanding of this topic. But then again, if you just want to write down a quick note on what it is, that's perfectly alright too. Obviously, it's as long as you can understand it, that's the main thing. And the amount of work you put into each of these questions, I'll be going through them in a general level of detail, and I'll be hinting at some things that if you would have put a bit more effort into the questions, then I will explain that as well. But anyway, so they're just a few questions. It's totally up to you if you answer them or not. Alright, So they are in logical order, by the way. I won't be starting with Monopoly. I am just going to start with perfect competition and work down to Monopoly. But the last one does require a bit of theory from the first half of the video. But apart from that, the rest of them go in order. So, as I said, hopefully you've got them down. So I'll give you a few moments at the start of the video to write them down, and then I've just went through them then. So you know what they are if you couldn't read them. It took a lot of writing that, by the way. Right, okay, so sort of going on from the video, you'll sort of be able to guess our agenda for today. I'll be going through, as I said, I think I've mentioned pure perfect competition and Monopoly in a previous case when we talked about market spectrum. But I'll just go, so I'll be introducing perfect competition, not introducing, recapping it essentially. Talking about abnormal, normal profit, short run, long run, equilibrium diagrams, and then I'll be explaining how we show the abnormal, normal profit on the long run and short run equilibrium diagrams for perfect competition. So that could help you with question 3. Then I'll be explaining why the perfect competition model doesn't exist, because you have to remember there's a reason it doesn't exist, and I'll be explaining that. And that's related to question 3, which you could also include in question 3 if you wanted. And then I'll be introducing Monopoly again. We might have already covered that in the last video. And then something else that actually I didn't put a question on, but you can formulate this if you want. I'm going to be explaining horizontal and vertical integration. So again, you can include that as a question if you want to. And then I'll obviously be drawing the short run and long run equilibrium diagrams for Monopoly, which is a little bit more complicated, but not too much. And I'll be explaining a few key things. I don't want to give too much away because otherwise I'll be explaining parts of the video. Then I'm going to explain why monopolies have a certain profit, and then recapping the questions that we just went through there. So just to give you a quick idea of what logic we're going through in this video. Right, so the first one I said was we're going to be talking about perfect competition. Now, perfect competition there's a couple of key things that we need to know. But the first one, right off the bat, now obviously you may think of different ones to start off with. The first thing that I think of when I think of perfect competition is they are all profit maximisers. And these are firms, by the way, so all firms are profit maximisers. And we'll show you where this occurs on the diagram in a bit. And then the rest of the ones that are a bit more obvious, that's the main key assumption, by the way. The rest of them are just a bit more obvious. These are assumptions, they're not strategic facts, because obviously the market doesn't exist, so we can't come up with facts for something that isn't real. Obviously, then all firms are profit maximisers, produce identical products. And consumers and firms have perfect knowledge of the market. Now, what we don't mean by this is consumers can just build the product themselves, but they prefer to buy it because they're all lazy slackers. But that's not the case. Basically, what that means is the firms and consumers know what the other firms are charging and what the other consumers are paying. So, in the context of this, if a firm lowered its price, obviously it wouldn't do that because it can sell any amount at the market price, as we discussed in the last video, then all the firms would buy from that, all the consumers would buy from that, and the other firms would react, and it wouldn't work. So anyway, that's... but the main problem, I mean, that's one of the problems. One of the main problems with lowering the prices is that they're not necessarily going to get any more customers because they can sell any amount at market price. They would just be reducing the cost, and that would be irrational behaviour, etc. So, anyway, back to these assumptions. So we said all firm profit maximisers, they produce identical goods. Then we just mentioned then consumers and firms have perfect market knowledge. I mean, obviously consumers don't take a lesson in perfect competition, have perfect knowledge of the market Sorry about my writing, by the way, it is a little bit off centre today. So I'm slowly dying. So, right. So, whatever. So, that's just 3 things of perfect competition. A few more. There is a, obviously, constant market price. Which obviously means they all charge the same price. Many buyers and sellers. And because there are many buyers and sellers, so there's as many consumers and firms basically. Because there are many buyers and sellers, this obviously allows us to say there's no barriers to entry. Right, okay, so they're just a few, there are a few more assumptions, but they're the main ones that I would try to focus on. I mean, there are 6 there. The main 3 I'd focus on are all firms have profit maximisers. They all produce. Sorry. So the 3. If I was going to focus on just 3, obviously I'd try and focus on all of these 6 as a main 6. But if I was trying to focus on 3, I'd do all firms profit maximisers, no barriers to entry or exit, and there's many buyers and sellers. And then I'd try and include consumers and firms with perfect knowledge of the market. But as I said, the main one really is that firms of profit maximisers, all of them in the market. So they're the main sort of ones I'd try and focus on. Right. Okay, so that's the features of a perfect competition. So I think that's question 1. So I will hint at the questions as we go through, and if there's any I think you need to point out. Right. Okay, so then we sort of mentioned about abnormal and normal profit. I think that's the next question. Now I'm going to actually highlight this by alluding to question 10. Drawing perfect competition, long run and short run, equilibrium diagrams, and explain a little bit about that. Right. Okay, so in the short run, you had obviously, because we drew these in the last video. You had a market diagram that was just basically a market from F581. You supply and demand, and where the intercept was an equilibrium E. And you had a market price P, and a quantity demanded and supplied Q. And then we drew another axis next to it. So it's the market, and then the other one is the individual. That's the individual in the market. And then what we did, if you remember, we carried this price line across, put P there, and then we drew a horizontal demand curve, which is equal to AR, average revenue, which is obviously equal to the marginal revenue. And if you don't get why that is, we did explain it in our last video on in this series. So that's the market and individual in the short run. Now, as I said, I'm not going to go into too much detail on that because I'm assuming if you didn't get that, you would just nip back and watch our other video on perfect competition. But that's the main one for the short run. Now, in the long run, obviously, you should be aware there's only one long run. But what I'm going to be drawing is there's 2 stages to this long run. There's one stage where obviously you have abnormal profits, and then there's the other, well, sort of, we initially have in the long run, in a market perfect competition, they initially have abnormal profits. So, and then we're going to sort of elude that, and then in further long run, if this makes sense, the profits are eroded by the new firms entering the market. So you can almost think of the first diagram as in the short run, but technically it's sort of not. It's a little bit confusing, but hopefully you understand that. Okay, so we're going to go back to that diagram we did before for the individual firm, because obviously the market doesn't change. Well, actually, the market technically does. Yeah, so we'll draw. Right. So I'm going to actually draw 4 axes on the board here. I won't say technically it does exist. So, and I'll explain why I'm drawing 4 in a minute, just a second. Obviously these all have, you know, price, quantity demanded and supplied on each axis. Right, okay, so there are 4 axes there. Right, so what we said was, right, so the top ones going along this way, these are going to be the market. Alright, so this is how I'm going to imagine it for you. So both of these are the market ones. Okay? And then on the bottom here, we're going to have the individual ones. And the top left is the market in the initial short run, initial long run, so we can think of it as a short run. And we said it looked like you have your supply and demand diagram with an equilibrium E, price P, quantity Q. I really should have drawn them next to each other actually in this same stage, but I didn't, didn't have the read. And then in the long run, obviously we have an equilibrium, but this equilibrium, to consider an equilibrium, you have to see revenues and costs. Well, we've only got, this is only equal to your average revenue equals your marginal revenue. It's only equal to revenue, it's not equal to any costs. So all you think we have to do, there's no real way to explain it. We have to just put the marginal revenue curves and the average total cost curves from our short run diagram cost curve. This is why it's a little bit confusing. So depending on where this average total cost curve goes, which is the U shape, where the bottom of the U is, that enables us to say, well, is it abnormal or normal profit? And I'll explain why that is. The first side, we're going to have abnormal profits because abnormal profits is what encourages a firm to join a market. So where there's abnormal profits, the lowest point of the average total cost curve is below the demand curve. So it sort of looks like this. This is the average total cost curve. It's not perfect, by the way. There's this line could be a bit more straight, but you get the idea. Right. And then the marginal cost curve is the same applicably, same method, as the short run cost curve, where it sort of bends and then goes up through the bottom of the average total cost curve to give you marginal cost curve. And now what we have to consider is where the price is. So this is the price, by the way. This is where the demand curve, right? So the price is where the marginal cost curve intersects. Sorry, the marginal cost curve should be MR, not MP. Where the marginal cost curve intersects the marginal revenue curve, and that's where the profits is maximised. So that's where what they'll charge. So we'll call this point A. Now we draw a line down from A, so a dotted line, to the average total cost curve, and we call this point B. And we take this carry on going this down, and we get Q. Right. So what we've got is A, which corresponds to the market with the price of the individual, which obviously is the price of the market, because in a perfect competition, the market price is the price which is represented by all firms, because they're all price takers, which is another feature of market perfect competition. So when we've got this B, we take the line across, and we get this C. Obviously you have 0 here at the bottom for both axes. Okay. Right, so this is getting a little bit confusing now. So where this average total cost curve, where it hits the average total cost curve at B, that's the cost of producing the next unit. So that's the C there. Now to work out our abnormal profit, we need to realise what profit means. Now, normal profit is where the firm is just, because in economics we consider normal profit to be, no, I'll explain normal profit in a minute actually. So this abnormal profit is a bit, sorry, right, forget, sorry I'm not doing this very well, forget abnormal, forget normal profit. This is how it looks with abnormal profit, and I'm going to explain a little bit of the difference. So you can save your answering question 3 or 4 in a minute. Right, so we know profit is total revenue, take total cost. So how do we show that? Well, total revenue, you should know, is price times quantity. So the price being charged is P, so it's 0P times 0Q. And that gets us this big square here of PAQO. So that's your total revenue. But you also have to include your total cost. Now we said the cost per unit is C, so the average total cost is C. So we have to times that by the quantity sold to get the total cost. So what we do is we do 0C times 0Q, because Q is the quantity sold, C is the cost per unit. So we have the smaller square inside the bigger square to get our total cost. So this little bit on top, the difference between the two on top, that is what we call the profit, but it's something that we call the abnormal profit. And you go, well, why don't we just call it profit? Right. Well, costs in economics, we have to think, well, what are these costs? Well, the main ones you'd think of is like, well, sure, it's like, for those of you who've done business studies, it's it's your raw materials, it's your lighting, it's your wages to the workers. And that's all very good. But that is what we call abnormal profit. The reason for that is because we have to understand what normal profit is to be able to understand abnormal. Now, normal profit is where all the factors of production are paid for, but there's none to reimburse the business. It's just enough to keep it all going. So, normal profit is where the profit is equal to the average, where the price is equal to the average total cost. So that allows us to draw this diagram here. So I'll go back to that in a second. So it's the same sort of diagram, okay? Except, as we said, the price is equal to the average total cost. So the average total cost was the lowest point on this average total cost curve. So if C is equal to P, then this horizontal demand curve must be at C. So it sort of looks like that, but we call the same price level, we'll call it P. Okay. So this is the average total cost. So basically what we've done is shifted this P down. Now we could draw that shift, but I'll draw it on in a minute. Because for this market in the long run, I'll change the market because I'm just going to shift the supply curve. Right. So you've got P there. Right. So if we draw the rest of it normally on, so you've got your marginal cost curve that goes through the bottom, and this is your quantity Q. Okay. Now because P is equal to C here, because the demand curve is lowered to where the price is equal to average total cost, because that is where normal profit is, because the average total cost is also including the payment to the entrepreneur, the profit. So that's why it's called normal profit. Because the profit is a payment to the entrepreneur. Abnormal profit is the profit above that. So it's where the entrepreneur is paid his wage, obviously much higher than everyone else's. And that allows the business to continue. Now businesses are happy with normal profit. They will only enter in abnormal profit to pay off the high costs or whatnot of entering the market. Right, so if this isn't confusing you, I don't know. Nothing will. So don't feel like you're left out. I will cover it again. So what we said here was the 0p times 0q. That's the total revenue, and the 0c times 0q was your total cost. But because c is equal to p, 0c is equal to 0p. We could write p is equal to c there, because price is equal to average total cost, which is what it is. Okay. But we'll leave it as P because that is what actually being charged. is equal to the cost. So it's 0p times 0q, that's total revenue, but it's also total cost. So we're not making any excess profit, we're not making any added on or abnormal profit. What we're just making is we're making normal profit. So a business is, as I said, happy to stay in the market with normal profit, but they won't enter a market without abnormal profit, no, with normal profit, because there's no incentive there. There's no, well, yes, we must get into this market. Okay, so that's the difference between abnormal and normal profit. Abnormal profit is when the price is charged higher than the average total cost, which the average total cost is at C. But because on normal profit levels, the price is equal to the average total cost, the area under this little square bit, that is the total revenue, which is also equal to the total cost. There's no extra profit being reimbursed into the business. So there's no evidence for new firms to try and push to enter that market. So that's the difference between abnormal and normal profit. Now we have to look at that in respective to the markets. So I should have drawn 3 diagrams there, but I'm going to just rub the extra bit on here out. Now this market, that's what it looked like in the short run, but in the long run, seen as new firms are entering the market, because of this abnormal profit. What we have, so if we draw our supply and demand diagram again, assuming the same price level, P, but the supply curve is actually going to shift because there's more suppliers entering the market because of this abnormal profit that was initially there to S1. This causes a lower equilibrium of E1, which causes a lower price of P1 with a higher output, Q1. Okay, so that should be familiar. Right, I haven't wrote P1 here, I've just labelled it P, but it is essentially P1. And hopefully, if you've understood that, it's fine, okay? But which is great, because that means you can understand this next bit. But just recap that last little bit if you didn't get it. Right. So this is essentially the same as P1, because the price has been lowered, because P was actually up here somewhere. So if we draw P, so this was the original price, because the demand curve was above the bottom of the average cost curve, which it isn't here, because the price, as we said, has been lowered. See, that's D1, which is equal to AR1, etc. But the price initially was something like up here. Well, this was D, that was P. So this P here is equal to this P here, but this P1 is equal to this C, which is probably a better way of saying it than I said before. And because we had the abnormal profit, if you remember, the abnormal profit was this bit here, which is this bit. So basically drawing the diagram twice, but with the lower demand curve, because this is a situation of normal profit where it's just a smaller square that's considered to be the total revenue as well as the total cost. Yeah, so anyway, that's why that is there. Sorry. So anyway, the price would have been lower than that, shows you of well, because of the price takers, so they're about to have it accept the market price of P1 here. So that's why it's been lowered like that. Now hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, I'll just go over it again. So the market initially looked like this, you supply and demand, etc. Normal F581 stuff, that's okay. And initially the market for perfect competition is making abnormal profit, because that's what's attracting all of these firms into the market. Because they're charging a price, P, which is generating abnormal profit, and the other firms will go, yeah, we'll have a bit of that. So they all join in and go, well, let's join this market. This causes the supply curve to shift S to S1. By doing that, they lower the market price, because say demand isn't going to shift, only supply does. Now, because all firms in a market of perfect competition are price takers, they have to accept this new lower price. And this in turn causes them to have to accept normal profit of P1, which we said was just equal to the little square, so C is equal to P1. So that's normal profit, because the average total cost is equal to the price, because the price is basically the average revenue per unit. Because if you lower the price of one curve, you have to lower the price of all the rest, as we explained in our previous video. You can't just lower the new price of the new ones you're just selling now, you have to lower them all. So that's why it's lowered like that. So for this sort of catalogue of diagrams, you can sort of imagine it as a story. So initially we're at this point, we're initially at these points here. So the market's initially looking like this, with the individual firm is sort of looking like this in its equilibrium state. Then we move on to this, because the firms are saying, yeah, we'll join in. They increase the supply, which lowers the market price, which lowers the market price for them all, which sort of is a barrier to entry. But recap our assumptions of perfect competition. One of our assumptions of perfect competition says that no barriers to entry. There's new firms entering the market all the time. No barriers to entry, no barriers to exit. But we've just said then, there's a barrier to entry in the form of this normal profit. Now, it's not necessarily a artificial barrier to entry, it's a natural barrier to entry. Now, it's just a bit of extra information. Didn't need to know that, just a bit of extra. Just throw it in your face. So that's why this occurs. So that explains why there's no point for competition. Because if there was, there'd be a normal profit, introducing barriers to entry, tick tick tick, but in a few months that goes away, because other firms have entered the market and eroded this abnormal profit. So that, I think, answers question 5 or something, or 6. So that's what happens in perfect competition. So that's really perfect competition summed up. So it sort of starts like that, goes to that increased supply, lowers the price, turns it into normal profit, as you would think. Right, so that's perfect competition all done. So all your questions about perfect competition should be answered now, apart from number 10, which you can leave for a minute. Alright, so I'll rub them off. Hopefully you had a minute just then. If you didn't, you could just rewind it while I rub this off. I'll see how it's going to take time. Let's see, never mind, long day. Right, now what we're going to be talking about now is monopoly. Right, there's one thing actually, I did have to pause the video there. Stop recording for a second. There was one thing that I didn't mention. I just realised looking at the questions. I didn't mention about the efficiencies. So you have 3 types of efficiencies. There's perfect competition. You have productively efficient, allocatively efficient, and dynamic efficiency. 2 that right off the bat that you can't deny with are productive efficiency, which is when the average total cost curve is its lowest point. Allocative efficiency, if they're being met consumers' needs and wants, etc. Dynamic efficiency, however, is slightly different. It can be argued in the sense of perfect competition, because dynamic efficiency states if a firm is to be dynamically efficient, this is why dynamic is or isn't, it's consistently innovating its products, production line to meet the consumer's needs. So basically, they're producing a product the consumer wants, or making the product's range wide enough so the consumer is getting exactly what they want. Because consumers, as we know, are lazy sods who just demand stuff and hope it's produced. The reason why that's debatable, now you could say that, yeah, firms are dynamically efficient, why wouldn't they be? I mean, if they're not meeting the consumer's needs, then surely they're way in business. Well, sort of more to it than that, actually. I'm not arguing myself. The product range is obviously the meeting all the products, because the consumers in that market are wanting this product and are producing it, so dynamically efficient. Product range is suitable. However, to be reinvesting into the business in production line techniques, updating the product range. Why would they want to do that? Because they can sell any amount of the products at the market price. They need abnormal profits to be able to reinvest. Now in theories they do invest, but they've not got any abnormal profit to reinvest into the business, because the abnormal profits are eroded in the long run by the competition entering the market. So they've got no incentive, really. They've got nothing. They might want to invest, but they've got no cash too, because all the cash that they make goes into paying back the suppliers, paying the wages of the workers, and paying the profit to the entrepreneurs. So no profits. There's no profit left over or abnormal profit to reinvest in and get a bit more out of the business. So that's why you can argue either way. Now I did start talking about monopoly before I interrupted myself. Now you should know about monopoly markets. I think what we did in the last video is we did something like this. So where we had the demand and average revenue curve, and then the marginal revenue curve hitting about halfway, and then we took this line down and we said then that's where the total cost curve, total revenue starts to fall. So it's something like that. Obviously it's not perfectly labelled, just done a quick sketch there, but essentially we're going to do the same theorem with the top diagram. We're going to introduce our average total cost curves and our marginal revenue curves. Now just before I do that, I'm going to draw it. So that was just recapping what we did in the last video for Monopoly. Now in the last video we also mentioned, sorry one sec, let me just draw this on. It's a bit steep, but never mind. Marginal cost was AR. Okay, so that's just a recap. That was just a recap of what we should know. What you should also know about monopoly markets is there's three types of monopoly. You've got pure monopoly, you've got dominant monopoly, and then you've got something called legal monopoly. Now legal monopoly is not a firm that's legally bound to be a monopolist. Quite confusing actually. It's actually a firm that's got between 0 and 25% market share. That's well, it's more 25%. Dominant monopoly. It's 25% to 40%. Yeah. So 25% to 40% is a legal monopoly. Sorry, that's what I was thinking there. And then 40% to 100 or 99.99%. That is a dominant monopoly. The pure monopoly is where the firm, there's only one firm in the market. So that answers one of your questions. Actually two there. So that's just a bit of information. Now let's put our curves on like we did in the other diagrams. The short run, so it needs to be a bit higher. If I don't get this right, I'll explain why it needs to be a bit more careful. So let me make sure I've got this right before I start. I think I have, it looks like it. So just be a second, just double checking my diagram. Back in a second. That's what it should look like. Sorry, just had to double check my notes. You may have noticed there I made a few mistakes. So I put that as MR, which should be MC, and then I put that as MC, which should be MR. MC and MR being marginal cost, marginal revenue, respectively. And then my average total cost curve, I've sort of redrawn it, because it should be, basically, we've got these points here. D is where the marginal cost curve intersects the marginal revenue curve. That's where profit's maximised, as we should know. And then obviously that we draw that line up to the demand curve, the average revenue curve, because that's the price. And then that gives us the price line. And then that B is where your profits are that's where your cost is, because it's your bottom of your average total cost curve. So you can work out your cost, so you know your total cost and total revenue, as we did with the perfect competition equilibrium. So basically that's what it looks like. And if you get that from what I've just said, great. If you don't, I'll just recap it again because there's a high probability I've not explained this very well. So all we did was put a marginal cost curve and an average total cost curve as we did before. Now we should know, I did mention it before, marginal cost equals marginal revenue at where profits are maximised. Now we can't draw a line across because what you would expect to do is draw a line across there to get your price. I mean, that should look ridiculous because then why would we have these other two curves? What's the point of having this other curve? Because the average revenue is the price, and the average revenue being the revenue from each product you sell. You're not going to sell ones at different price, in theory. Obviously you do, but we're ignoring that fact for the moment. Because that's my business anyway. So we draw it up to the average revenue curve, which is obviously the price, the demand curve, and that gets us our price. The bottom of the average total cost curve is where the business, the firm is you can sort of think of it as their total cost, which I guess it is. So that's why it goes there. Now I'll read you out the proper description. Obviously they're all price makers, so you could say, oh well, they charge any price, but they are still constrained by this demand curve, as you can see. Now, what we said before, when we had this bit here, the extra bit on top of the normal profit, remember costs are associated with payment to employees as well, the entrepreneur, sorry. When we had this other bit, we called it abnormal profit. Now that is right, so the abnormal profit is PCA, whatever that little bit there is, PCBC, so the abnormal profit PCBA or PACBC, whatever you want to call it, that bit there. But because we're in a monopoly and there's no new firms entering the market because they're very high barriers to entry, we call this the monopoly profit, or the profit of the monopolist, because there is no new firms entering the market because we're assuming it's pure monopoly. So that's why we get that little bit there. And hopefully, as I said, that makes some kind of logical sense. There's not much more to it than that. That's the end of the video. Well, it's not technically the end of the video because we've still got to go through the questions. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to write all the answers to the questions. I'm just going to go through the questions, telling you the answers while sort of sitting out of the way, so you can observe the board if you need to, and again ask any questions when you know, obviously not virtually through the camera. You can't do that. You know, just comment on the video or whatnot. So anyway, first one, define perfect competition. Now, perfect competition is a market. This is sort of related to the second one, so I can understand if you got a bit confused on the first two. You can sort of combine them together. So it's a market that has many buyers and many sellers. It's probably the one you want for the first one, which you can use that as a feature for the second one. But remember, the profit maximisers all produce all the same goods. Consumers and firms have perfect knowledge of the market. As I said, they're all producing identical products. The workers are thought to be exactly the same. They're not geographically immobile, so they can move. There's just a few features there. Obviously, you could go back to the start, and there's a few more that are listed. But I don't want to go into too many details, so I just want to get through these questions. And then, what is the difference between normal and abnormal profit? Well, if you remember, for normal profit, we said the normal profit occurs where the price is equal to the average total cost, because we're factoring in. You could go into explain about why we're factoring in the costs of the payment to the entrepreneur, but it's enough to keep the business going. And if you again wanted to go a bit further, you could say firms are not attracted by normal profit; they are attracted by abnormal profit. Obviously, the abnormal profit is the bit where the price is above the average total cost, and it's that little extra bit. And you could, if you were going into a bit more detail, you could draw the diagram if you wanted to. So you'd be able to get a bit more marks for that if you wanted. What type of profit does a market attract new competitors into the market, and why is this eroded in the long run in terms of perfect competition? We sort of said it there. abnormal profit because they want to get rid of their high startup costs, etc. But this is eroded because all the different firms compete for it. List and describe the efficiencies with a market of perfect competition and how each efficiency can be debated. And which efficiency can be debated, I don't think I wrote that extra little bit, but you could have included that, you might have included that. So productively efficient is where the average total cost goes at its lowest point. So that's where that's about it you could say for that one. Then you would talk about allocative efficiency, so that's just your F581 explanation for that. Then we talked about dynamic efficiency, which we said dynamic efficiency essentially was your where the production lines got to be updated every so often and the products got to be innovated. We say yes, it is, because it has to meet consumer needs in the market, and obviously consumers demand these different products, so they have to keep up with the competition because they're producing the same products, so they have to produce the same products as the competition, so it sort of works out in the market. But they need abnormal profit to reinvest, so they don't have that because it's eroded in the long run, so therefore it's debatable. How many firms, and the next question said, how many firms are in the market pure monopoly? That's just one. List the features of a market pure monopoly. Obviously, one one firm producing slightly differentiated products. I guess they are just one, so they are sort of anyway. Yeah, and they have 100% market share, and you could list the different types of monopolies, which is actually the next question. So that's your legal, 25 to 40%, dominant, 40% to 99%, and your 100% is your pure monopoly. And we've sort of said it there. We included two questions in one there. What type of profit does a market pure monopoly make, and why is this constant? So we said, it just reminded me. This is, I did sort of mention it, but I've not mentioned it in the specific content of this question. So that diagram on the board, that is both for the short run and the long run. And that's because obviously there's no new firms entering the market, so this abnormal profit's not going to be eroded. So there's no curves that are going to shift. So that's why you could sort of answer that by saying it's a constant abnormal profit of a monopoly profit, another way of saying it. That's because there's no new firms entering the market. So I kind of did answer that, but I didn't answer it in the context of the question. So I didn't say precisely, question 8, this is the answer. And then the last one, number 10, that was number 9, sorry. That was number 10. Draw the long run and short run equilibrium diagrams for the markets of perfect competition and pure monopoly. I'm assuming you've got them right. There's a pure monopoly one on the board there. And obviously the ones we did before, there's no point me just rubbing out that, so you might as well just skip back a few minutes in the video. So that's the essence of it, really. In the next video we'll be just going on a bit more about monopoly, and we're going to have a look at price discrimination and how monopolies reduce economic welfare. That's a bit of a kicker. I haven't decided yet, but I might upload another video with a task sheet that I'll be going through, but that's really the key stuff. The only thing that confuses me slightly is this B. This line here, this B at the lowest point of the average total cost curve, the B should be just grazing this line going down. Obviously mine's not perfect because I drew it freehand. So from where you're looking, I could see, well, it looks like there should be two different outputs, but there really just should be one. Okay, so that's essentially what it is. Hopefully that's been of some use to you, and we'll see you in the next video. And sorry for not being too humorous today. It's like to lose a will to live. But anyway, we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.